I'm Steven Scheuer, welcoming you to another in our series of oral histories in which we are fortunate indeed to be able to interview those persons who have helped shape the style and substance of television and our major media today. Our guest today has not only established tenets of responsible and enterprising broadcast journalism, but has enhanced them in every broadcast throughout his long and distinguished career at CBS News as anchor, managing editor, and correspondent. Who else would earn the title, the most trusted man in America, but our guest today, Walter Cronkite. Walter, I'm immensely grateful for your joining us today on this sad time in America. We're talking in New York City on October 15th, on a Monday, October 15th, 2001. And we'll try to cover as much of your illustrious career as we possibly can in this brief time. But I wonder, where were you and when you first learned of the attack on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon on September 11th, and what were your initial reactions?
We were in a car in Florence, Italy, and I was over there making a couple of speeches, and we had just left the hotel for some touring that day when our driver on his cellular phone received a call, and he said, an airplane has just hit your Twin Towers. We never referred to them as the Twin Towers, and I really didn't know what he meant. He had something of an accent, and I was puzzled. And then I figured out he meant probably the World Trade Center. But I thought, of course, it was an accident. But I did say, let's get back to the hotel right away and see what we can find on television. We got back and tuned in CNN, and of course, it was full of the event. And just as we got there, we saw, I assume, a replay of the second airplane hitting the South Tower while the North was aflame and smoking. And of course, we stayed tuned to CNN for the next 5 days until we could get a plane back to the States. We got the first plane out of Italy on the following Sunday to return home. I think I suffered the same reaction as every American and perhaps every civilized person in this world. A terrible shock and disbelief that this thing could happen and that it could be plotted by so-called human beings.
It has caused, of course, incredible changes in all our lives and American lives and the world geopolitical agendas. But I wonder, what do you think are the new changed ground rules of American television? You've been dealing in a long and thoughtful way with the whole issue of censorship in wartime and how you balance that with the requisite press freedoms. Tell us your thoughts on this momentous issue at this time.
Well, Steve, I wouldn't have thought that there was going to be a sea change in how we practice journalism until I read a couple of days ago that the traditional networks had agreed, and indeed the cable news networks had agreed with a request by the government that it not carry bin Laden's propaganda broadcasts in this country. I don't know who's being protected in that case. The other networks for the other countries in the world are not observing similar blackouts of his information.
Surely the great BBC is not.
The BBC is not, nor is the Arab Islamic networks or the other networks in the other countries. As far as I know, I've never heard that any of them are observing any such blackout. So only the American people are being denied what it is that he is propagandizing at the moment. I can understand to some degree the concern about coded messages, but as I've been reading, most of the intelligence experts
think that's highly unlikely.
Highly unlikely that it would be so. And if so, it would represent certainly a much more deeply organized plot around the world than we had ever imagined was possible, even in the test of our imagination in the World Trade bombings themselves. I don't quite understand it, and I don't quite understand why the networks here at home should have acceded to that.
You think it was a mistake?
I do think it was a mistake, unless there's something we just haven't been told. Otherwise, it's protecting the American people from the enemy's propaganda. It seems we should know as much as possible about the enemy's propaganda, what the rest of the world is hearing from bin Laden, that we should not be shut off from this information. It seems important to me that we should have it. And the other thing that disturbs me is the probability, from what we've heard, that the military is not going to entertain the idea of reporters and cameramen accompanying our military forces in action. They did this in the Persian Gulf War to a denial of our history. We have no independent history of what happened in the front lines of the forces that invaded Iraq. The military organized pool coverage and assigned pool reporters, and then did not take them along. We were blacked out. The only history we have, the only photographs we have, the only film we have was that shot by the Army Pictorial Service or reported by Army public relations officers. That's scarcely an impartial report, and that's all the history we have. We not only don't have a history of anything that went wrong with our forces, and we should be entitled to that, but we don't even have a history of the heroism. That's not reported either, as far as we know. I'm hoping that the military grows a little wiser in this case and will tolerate, and not only tolerate, but welcome correspondence with the forces in action. That does not mean that they're entitled to send their dispatches, to use satellite to cover the battlefield live. That's impossible. There must be military secrecy, military security, and the press must recognize that and respond to it. We worked perfectly well in World War II, perfectly well. In the European theater, the correspondents could go anywhere they wished to go, and the military helped us get there. But all of our material had to be submitted through a very well-organized censorship. And while the military censors commanded the battlefield, the material eventually got back to military censors, but men who were drafted from the legal profession usually, and recognized the public's right to know, and not only their right to know, but their duty to know, and passed material that they felt the military was withholding only for their own political reasons, not for military secrecy. And all of the dispatches were eventually released. If a day later or 2 days later or a week or a month later, they were finally released when the military secrecy was no longer necessary.
One of the things that has just recently come to my attention was what I thought a remarkable statement of yours in reference to something that happened immediately after the September 11th attacks, which were the comments by Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson. Oh. And I have not seen, it was published in TV Guide. I haven't yet had a chance to see it, but tell us what you said in that article, or what you feel about it.
Well, I said it in making one of the two speeches I was scheduled to make in Italy, and that came just a day after the Falwell-Robertson statement. And I said I found it incredible, indeed incredibly insulting to many Christians in this country, most of the Christians in this country. Most of the Christians do not belong to the far right conservative elements to which Falwell and Robertson appeal. But for them to suggest that those who belonged to the American Civil Liberties Union, who belonged to other liberal organizations.
People for the American Way.
People for the American Way, for heaven's sakes. Tens of thousands of people who belonged to those organizations were somehow guilty of creating this situation.
Licentious television was one of the evils that they were
talking
about.
Can you imagine that? And I said I just did not know that Falwell and Robertson worshiped the same God as bin Laden worshiped.
They later apologized, but in that situation, the apology seems to me to make it even more grotesque.
We have to accept apologies, I suppose, but we don't have to accept them intellectually. And intellectually, what we found out was that this was what Falwell and Robertson harbor in their hearts, is that kind of an attitude toward the liberals in this country. Those who would protect our civil liberties, protect our right to worship as we please.
Not everyone who has watched your work over the last 30 or 35 years understands your service in World War II itself.
I had taken some rather rudimentary parachute training to go with the paratroops in that drop, wherever it was going to be. I didn't know where, but the next airborne operation after the landing in Normandy. What we thought it was going to be, and would have been the great story of the war, was to drop outside of Paris in Rambouillet Forest and to take Paris from the north and to cut off the Germans, and we would be the first forces into Paris. What an assignment that would have been. But it turned out that Patton and the rest of the boys got there before we could drop. We were in the planes in England, but we never got off the ground. They overran the area before we could get off. And we ended up dropping into the Netherlands to try to take the bridges at Arnhem so that we could turn the Rhine at the north and get across the Rhine that way. The 101st Airborne dropped in the southern part of the Netherlands with Eindhoven as the target. The 82nd dropped a little further up the way at the Nijmegen bridges, and the British dropped on the other side of the Rhine in Arnhem with great tragic losses. But I thought when I got up there to the 101st was summoned into battle, and I was told I was going in a glider instead of by parachute. I came very close to refusing the assignment. Being a civilian, I certainly could have, a civilian volunteer with the United Press. But I would never have been able to go into a bar with my colleagues in London again if I had. But I'd seen what happened to the gliders in the landings in Normandy. And they're a terrible mess. It's simply no way to go to war, and we're never going to do that again, I don't think.
I remember maybe 15 years ago, I had a long interview with your colleague Charles Collingwood, whom I admired very much, and he was talking about his own reaction when he was in a plane over Normandy the first day, and he was trying to impress Ed Murrow and do a good job, but he was also, understandably, the German gunfire was all around him, and he was understandably terrified, and he talked with some eloquence about the narrow line. I think I'm remembering almost exactly what Charles said, the narrow line between bravery and madness. Those of us who have never been in this combat situation don't really understand it. Can you elaborate on that? Were you scared? How do you prepare yourself for those situations?
Combat itself is a form of madness, obviously. War is a form of madness in itself. It's hardly a civilized pursuit. It's amazing that we spend so much time inventing devices to kill each other and so little time working on how to achieve peace. But at any rate, with that little moral lesson behind us, that you know, in wartime, you do the extraordinary, of course. And I think as a correspondent, as a war correspondent, those of us who've had the opportunity and took the opportunity felt that we were doing our part of the job, our part of the duty to be out there reporting with the troops. The greatest compliment we had during the war came from the GIs in whose foxholes we shared at times, or airplanes we shared, or whatever, who would say, do you have to be here? What are you doing here? We have to be here. You don't have to be here. It was meant as primarily a compliment, although with some sense that you're a little bit out of your mind. You're with all situations in wartime, and certainly with many in peacetime, such as keeping your cool while covering that terrible disaster on September 11th. As the reporters did, I was amazed at how cool they maintained. Your adrenaline is pumping. you are in a role. You're role playing almost, in that you know what you must do, and you're doing it. You're doing your job. When you see a terrible thing like battle and war, or seeing that thing happen in New York, your trauma comes later. When you relax, when you're let down, when the adrenaline is not pumping, then there is a terrible reaction.
Does the trauma diminish at all when you've been rested and go back into combat and you face that again?
No, then you're back at work. I think, we're very much like the emergency workers, the policemen, the firemen, although not so heroic, of course, as they, and the emergency hospital workers. But we're doing a job, and we're concentrating on doing that job as well as we can. And as such, we cut out, the emotions are removed until the relaxation point comes, and then it hits you what you've been reporting. In the case of Kennedy's assassination, I went fine for the first hour and a half until I had to say, he's dead. And with that, the enormity of what I'd been reporting came to me, and I puddled up a bit. I had a little trouble getting the words out.
A bulletin from CBS News: President Kennedy has been shot by a would-be assassin in Dallas, Texas. Stay tuned to CBS News for further details. From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official: President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago. Vice President Lyndon Johnson has left the hospital in Dallas, but we do not know to where he has proceeded. Presumably, he will be taking the oath of office shortly and become the 36th President of the United States.
Was there any other experience that you've had that was so wrenching, and to this day it seems amazing you were able to keep your composure in that way?
Well, barely kept my composure. No other experience quite like that. Nothing, not having to announce that a young, popular President of the United States had been assassinated in such a fashion.
One of the things that I and many others of observers of American television admired about you is your ability to seemingly extemporaneously talk with wisdom and wit for extended periods of time. And I wondered whether you got some early training in that by an experience when you were trying to break into radio and you went to a Dallas station and you were asked to broadcast a mythical football game and put it in a studio. Tell us what happened then.
Well, I had done some football in a station in Kansas City by wire report. Western Union reports that were sent from the stadium where the game was being played, and they were just very abbreviated little reports that the Western Union operator himself put in on the wire. They'd say something like Brown 237 Jones, and from that, with some crowd noise fed in the background, I'd say Southern Cal's in the huddle. They break out of the huddle now. There they are on the line. Brown's back. Brown takes the ball. He's going over toward the left side of the line. He looks in. Boy, they piled on him there. I don't think he made a yard. Maybe 2 yards there. They're coming. Yeah, made exactly 2 yards. And Jones was in on the tackle. That boy Jones is having some ball game today. And so they're on the 37-yard line, 2nd and 8 on the 37.
It sounds like a bravura performance to me, but it didn't satisfy your would-be employers?
Yeah, well, this was WKY in Oklahoma City that signed up the University of Oklahoma for their first live football broadcast for their season. And they were looking for a broadcaster, and the Kansas City man recommended me. So there I was in a Dallas studio, as they said, do a football game for us.
Did you get the job after the Dallas audition?
I got the job, and it was a near disaster because I'd never covered live football before. And they said, what do you need now to make this go? So I invented an electric board where one guy for one team, one for the other, punched buttons. And all I'd have to do is look at the lights, and I could tell who had the ball, how far they went, like playing a game on a computer today. Well, unfortunately, my 2 spotters were terrible. The machine didn't work, and it was one of the world's worst broadcasts. I thought I'd be fired. That my manager of the station, Gail Grubb, nice fellow, but an ex-vaudeville hoofer himself, but a very nice man. But he stood in back of me in the booth, and he started out by just slightly murmuring. Quite frankly, what he said was, "Christ." Christ. He got louder and louder till I was sure the microphone must be picking it up, until the end of the game, and he said, "Come with me." And we sat outside the booth in the stands as the shadows lengthened over the stadium, and we both thought we'd be fired. Turned out we were not. Went on to greater successes.
In the 1950s, your colleagues at CBS News assembled what is arguably the best set of television journalists ever put together on one team. And they included, among many others, Ed Murrow, Eric Sevareid, Charles Collingwood, Howard Smith, Alex Kendrick, Dan Shore, and others. Did you understand at the time the astonishing caliber of the team that CBS had put together, which dominated American television journalism in the 50s and 60s, and I think has never been rivaled since? How did you feel about it at the time?
Oh, I knew that I was joining that team as a very junior member of the team. My experience had been in print journalism primarily, and I've been following them ever since I returned from Russia after the war. I was in Nuremberg for the first year after the war, and then Russia for a couple of years. We came home finally in late '48, and I'd followed the CBS team, and I'd followed them, as a matter of fact, when I was overseas. I knew their caliber. I knew exactly what I was joining. I was terribly pleased that I would be invited to join that team. I joined them in 1950.
But you had been originally made an offer by Ed Murrow, and you accepted, and then you reneged on it. Why did you change your mind?
Well, I tell you, I loved the old United Press, and I liked United Press work. I liked print journalism. I had tried radio a little bit in college and a little bit after that, and I hadn't been particularly pleased with it. Radio news was pretty schlock, to tell you the truth, before World War II. World War II made broadcasting news. Before that, they read the newspapers or whatever, and it wasn't much of an organization. And I didn't like it when I had to participate in it. So I'd gone back to the United Press and stayed there for 11 years. And I was on the ladder to do even better things with United Press. And at least I felt I was. And when Ed called me and invited me to join CBS during the war, in fact, I was going to go to replace Bill Downs, the same Bill Downs, in Kuibyshev, where the Russians had set up government, having fled Moscow. And it was a good assignment, one that I found interesting, and he made it even more so. When I went back to United Press, Harrison Salisbury, the great Harrison Salisbury, great reporter, for it later with the Times, of course, was our bureau chief in London. And he said, "Oh, you can't leave United Press. It's my fault, but I was authorized to give you a $12.50 raise 2 weeks ago, and you were out with the airfields, and I didn't get to it. I've got a $12.50 raise just waiting for you." Well, I said,
that was serious money at the time?
Huh?
That was serious
that was a
money?
lot of money out because I was making $67.50 at the time. This was $12.50, a big raise. That put me all the way up to $80, a week. That was amazing. And I said, well, I thought I'd give my word to Murrow, and I guess I'm going to do that. Well, I got home that night, and of all things, Hugh Bailey, who was the president of United Press, must have talked to the president himself, must have gotten Roosevelt on the phone, because there were no private phone calls ever made to Europe in those days. There were very few lines on the cable, and they were all for military purposes. But by gosh, he got through to me, got me at home in my apartment in London, And so what are you doing quitting the United Press? You're going to be the next president of this organization, which wasn't true at all, which I knew wasn't true. But he gave me such a flowery buildup and then said, and furthermore, I've authorized a $12.50 raise for you. I said, well, I know, Mr. Bailey, Harrison Salzburg already told me about that. Oh, I mean, besides that, another $12.50. Well, that meant a $25 raise on a $67.50 salary.
What was Ed Murrow's pay salary offer at the time? Was it better than that?
It was $110, but he built up the commercial fees. Every broadcast you do that has a sponsor, you get an extra set of money. Well, I didn't quite believe that. I thought, well, that was a sales pitch, so there probably wouldn't be that much money. But he said, you could make a lot of money that way. Well, it turned out I could have, as Downs did and others did, but I wasn't smart enough to realize that. And I didn't regret either, because I stayed then with United Press through the war, Nuremberg, chief.
And you were later on posted to Moscow in 48 with him.
46 I went.
46.
Came back in late 48. Mm-hmm.
In another interesting part of the book, you say that you had earlier mentioned that you were in Korea and had come back to accept the job with the Washington station, the newly acquired CBS station in Washington. And you were the anchorman for that news program. But you write that you personally were not aware of the impact of television on the general public and the fame it would bring to all of you until your involvement during the summer of the political convention in Chicago in 1952. Would you talk about that for a minute? What happened that was so extraordinary?
Well, my experience until 1952 was mostly on local television in Washington, although that's a rather important outlet, of course, for a television station. And I was close to the political figures, which helped a lot in covering the political convention of 52, and that's why I suppose I got the assignment. But immediately, the television coverage of the conventions was in every home and every television set in the country. The three networks, which were the only sources for coverage in the state on the stations of the country, were all covering it. The public really didn't have a chance not to watch the political coverage. But it was a fascinating civics lesson for the American people, a fascinating story. We, for the first time, and the only time really, saw the political conventions as they always had been from their inception at the turn of the 17th, 18th centuries, the 18th and 19th centuries, that is. Until then, they were chaotic. They were brute force politics as played from the gutter up, and we made it, I think, in television, we made it a fascinating running story with the personalities involved, the movements involved, the forces involved. The speaker stands, for instance, were chaotic. The speaker at each convention, the chairman of each convention, was surrounded by people demanding a microphone. And he could hardly be heard over the microphone he had, with the babble of people behind him arguing that they should speak next. There was no coherence to the situation at all. And out in the hall, the chairs were all movable chairs, kind of camp chairs that camp meetings used to have. They had been organized very nicely for the beginning of the session, but by an hour later they'd been moved around a lot. The signs under the banners under which each state delegation had were cockeyed. The speakers for the delegations constantly demanded to be heard, and half the time, most of the time, not being heard. It was fascinating stuff. And we were taking our cameras into the meetings in the hotels of the candidates and their supporters and the state delegations in the hotels, so that it really was an incredible bit of television, both for the Republicans and the Democratic conventions. The problem was that the parties understood how chaotic their conventions appeared, and from there on out they began cleaning them up a little bit and then more and more, until by 56 they already had cleaned them up to a degree. By 60 they had rather well purified them. By 64 everything was swept under the rug except the formal presentation of speeches, so that the whole meaning of the convention was lost, and has been lost ever since.
Do you think that will ever come back? That will ever be changed?
No.
Because the two major parties control it too tightly?
No, oh, absolutely. They control it completely. It's their convention. It's theirs to control.
Right.
We can't make them put on a television show for us, and if we tried, it wouldn't work. In its natural form, it was a fascinating television. And any form you tried to create now would only be a television show. But that's what we're getting now, of course. The platform committee meets behind closed doors. Credentials committee meets behind closed doors. Those were where two of the primary fights took place within the conventions before. And the fight on the convention floor, the number of ballots they went through was, really heavy drama.
Was the outbreak of violence in the 1968 Democratic Convention in Chicago with Mayor Daley, was that an exception to this tightly controlled room pattern?
Yes, it was. And of course, that took place outside the hall for the most part. There were a couple of incidents. John Chancellor for NBC got hustled out of the hall under arrest, and Dan Rather was knocked to the floor by some of Daley's hoodlums. It was I really do think that Daley had planned, and whether it was with the connivance of President Johnson or not, I don't know. But we knew that Johnson had his plane standing by Johnson City in Texas, ready to go to the convention. And I think that Daley had planned a repeat of the famous Voice from the Sewer, which helped nominate Roosevelt in earlier conventions. He had packed the stands, and all the people in the stands had Johnson signs to hold up, and I think they were going to try for a draft of Johnson for another term. It never took place because of the turmoil on the floor. They gave up the effort.
You make reference in your book to the death of your colleague Don Hollenbach, and you said you'd admired very much. Virtually nobody now in 2001 would remember, but Hollenbach was an extraordinarily good reporter.
Very good.
Who was hounded at the time by the Hearst papers, and notably the very conservative right-wing television critic Jack O'Brien at the time. And they kept saying the most defamatory and hateful things about Hollenbach, and it was a terrible time. And finally Hollenbach committed suicide because he just couldn't deal with it any longer. And the whole question of blacklisting was so ugly. Those papers at the time were in favor of blacklisting, George Sokolsky and all those organizations. And I want to ask you, I never quite understood why Paley and Stanton and some of the others at the time didn't simply say blacklisting is a rotten, unethical, un-American business and we're not going to have anything to do with it. Why were they cowed by a grocer from Syracuse who ran a few supermarkets? Charlie Collingwood was a member of the union, and he was very good, and he tried to fight it. And Ed Murrow and I were among the people who gave money to John Henry Falk, who's brought a libel suit against them and helped end blacklisting. But what is your recollection these many years later of why CBS didn't take more of an aggressive stance to fight blacklisting? Why did they go along with it?
I think it was dollars and cents, purely commercial. The pressure was on from the advertisers who believed that this pro-American, anti-communist front represented the majority of the American people, and they were cowed by the organizers of that front themselves, and as a result, the management of the networks just didn't have the courage to face the commercial pressure. It's sad, certainly a very sad chapter, in which both Paley and I know Stanton regretted very much later on. I think that Stanton certainly felt and feels that it was one of the low points of his career, having put up with that as long as they did. And you mentioned Collywood. He was the most courageous of all in standing up and getting himself elected, standing up for the freedom of speech and press, and the anti-blacklisting, and accepted the leadership of the union. It was very courageous, and many of the news people, as you did, supported their effort, which took a bit of courage themselves. It was awfully easy for these people to put anybody on the blacklist just by a mimeograph machine.
Their career was over, and then there were other people who were unemployed for a long time. Great
some lost their
talents
jobs
like
forever.
Zero Mostel, some of whom committed suicide, and others were driven out of the industry altogether. But the economics, I remember being reminded at the time of how powerful it was. There was a brief period for 48 hours when Lucille Ball was blacklisted, and Paley or Stanton or somebody said, hey, wait a minute, we got big stakes involved here. And within a couple of days or one or two phone calls, that was all cleared up, and I Love Lucy continued on to this great success. But it was economics that drove that, for them to say, hey, this is unacceptable and we got to get her off this list.
Absolutely.
You also note in the complexities of the emerging television journalism about the extraordinary difficulty and logistics of reporting on and broadcasting the coronation of Queen Elizabeth in 1953 from London. Do you want to share your recollections about that and what you and Don Hewitt and the other people had to do to get a scoop home?
Well, of course, the objective of each of the networks was to be first with the coronation and best and most complete with the coronation. There's a great interest in this country in it, of course, with this young queen taking over. And there was no satellite communication, of course, at that time, not even telephone communication of broadcast quality. So we devised two systems at CBS. One was the one that Don Hewitt put together with Ed Murrow, and that was a chartered aircraft to fly Murrow and the film back, and they would edit the film on the way and have a cohesive presentation, 2-hour presentation when they arrived from the beginning to the end of the day, Coronation Day. I was involved in the second team, and that team was going to fly film back by mosquito bomber under the Canadian Air Force, Royal Canadian Air Force. We would participate in those flights. They would not drop our film in the United States, however, but we would pick it up in Halifax. And we've had a P-51 fighter plane at Halifax that would fly our film on down to New York. We were going to put that film together by a very intricate system in an empty building at the airport in London with the mosquitoes standing by outside. We had rapid developing film equipment that we could run the film right through it, develop and print at the same time, and instantaneously almost. And we were taking the BBC coverage, putting it through that print system, and I had a microphone, and I knew what the British were going to say. It was all scripted practically, and we would cut in and out of interesting moments, thus compressing the coverage, and I'd come in with the commentary as it went, ad-lib for the most part, but with some knowledge what was happening. Well, a lot of knowledge of what was happening. I could hear the BBC and had their script. So we did that, and we placed the first 5 reels in the first mosquito to go, and off it went. Now this stuff was in cans, film cans, that you know a lot about, of course, labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and times on them. Well, the mosquito got to Halifax in fine shape. Our P-51 with an old fighter pilot was standing by. The problem was that he found that he couldn't put these big cans in the cockpit, the little tiny P-51 cockpit with him. So he took the film out of the cans, they were in little reels, and put them all around him in the seat and threw the cans off the side. Well, from Boston, at Boston, we got him I forget who was covering there in Boston, but at any rate, we had cameras showing the plane landing.
There he is. On the deck. I think he's on the deck now. That was 20 seconds after 13 minutes after 4 o'clock, and Joe DeBona has made it.
And they were announcing from New York, the plane is landing now, and there it is, it's on the runway. We'll have film, the first film in a moment, and the others hadn't gotten in yet. First film of the coronation.
In some place, as Bill Downs told you, there's hardly any room in that plane except for gasoline and Joe DeBona, and they had to tuck those films away. As you see, they're taking them from all points, all sides of the pilot. He may even be sitting on some, I'm not sure, but he's
now the film is handed to our messenger to run up in the control tower where the transmission facilities were.
Projectors, and here they go. This is the foot race to get them into the projector. Now,
and here was the film without anything on it. Didn't say first to fifth at all.
I don't know. You got the first one there, Tommy, or do you know?
Well, they could do nothing but just slap the first reel of film on and hope for the best. As luck would have it, the film that they slapped onto the transmitter device was the film of the actual coronation itself. So instead of all that stuff in the morning of the Queen out on the balcony, of the parade of the troops, of her carriage ride to the...
And Richard Dimbleby's
we went right
voice.
to the coronation.
Right.
And we beat everybody with the coronation. We darn near beat the BBC with the coronation.
Walter Cronkite reporting from London, where in a few moments now, Queen Elizabeth II leaves Buckingham Palace, the building over which the royal standard flies, famed Buckingham Palace, for the most significant ride of her life, to bear 2 miles through wildly cheering crowds to Westminster Abbey, where in a ceremony 1,000 years old, she's to be crowned Britain's 6th reigning queen.
What are the acceptable ground rules? And I'm segueing in, I hope gracefully, to the problem that you wrestled with when you came back from Vietnam and made that remarkable long essay on your evening news show, the gist of which was saying American policy may be a mistake, and Lyndon Johnson then responded to it. Tell us about how that all came up and your misgivings about making such a personal statement, if they were misgivings.
Well, there were
Your
misgivings.
concerns.
What had happened was that the Tet Offensive, of course, amazed all of us. We had been told by our military leaders in Vietnam that we could see light at the end of the tunnel. It was the Vietnam equivalent of World War I. The boys would be out of the trenches by Christmas type thing. The war went on 3 more years. The Vietnam War was going on. But now, with the amazing strength of the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese to mount this offensive that carried them right to the gates of Saigon and recaptured what we had thought were liberated villages, hundreds of them through Vietnam, with a great loss of life on our side as well. This shook the confidence of America. We all felt, in fact, we knew this was happening. This was a reaction of Americans. How could this be? And since, I suppose somewhat egotistically, we at CBS thought that we had been doing a very good job of hewing pretty well to the center of the line in reporting the period that was probably more divisive in the United States than any other time except the Civil War itself. And here now the people were more further confused. We decided that since we felt we had this reputation, since we've been shot at equally by both sides, we must be in the middle of the road. I would go out and do a straight documentary on what was happening out there. And if I felt strongly about it, I might do an editorial on what I felt about it. This had not been done before, and by us.
That was your hope, or that was your understanding with management before you left?
Yeah, but I didn't know that I'd be doing anything.
Right.
I didn't know that I'd come down hard on either side. I certainly didn't know what side I would come down on at all. When I went out and saw what was happening, I talked to the military leaders, what they were saying, And I was particularly dumbfounded by their statement that give us 150,000 more men and we can finish this job. Here we were back on our heels. We've been giving the military all the people they needed and all the money they needed, and now 150,000 more.
And we'd been lied to for many, many months.
Many months. And it was a disaster, of course. So when I came back, we did the documentary, and then I felt the editorial welling up in me. And I wrote it and took it to Dick Salant and said,
Then president of CBS
he was
News.
president of CBS, and a stickler for form, a stickler for non-commentary.
A lawyer by training, not a journalist,
Yes,
we should point out.
yeah. But he turned out to be one of the best of our
great.
journalists. He was incredible. And he looked at it and he said, if this is what you feel, if you label it what you're doing, why, go ahead, more power to you. And what I said was that I felt we should look at what we've done as an honorable nation, doing our best to preserve the grounds for democracy, which had not been realized in South Vietnam, and that we had given much material and blood in pursuing this effort, and we should now sue for peace and get out. And I labeled it very clearly, did it after we did the documentary, went to commercials first, before and after the commercials, said this was a personal opinion, mine alone. And I felt that we were going to get a much stronger reaction than we did, in the sense that there would be demands for my dismissal at CBS and probably from advertisers and others. That never developed. The public accepted these words apparently, and editorial opinion newspapers appreciated them as an honest statement, fact. And in the White House, there was a remarkable reaction. Moyers, who was at the White House, an assistant then, and Tom Johnson, who later became head of CNN, Los Angeles Times, they reported that the president, who watched all three programs and watched our special particularly, after he heard my editorial, snapped the set off and said, well, if I've lost Cronkite, I've lost America. Middle America, he said. And indeed, within a couple of weeks, he was announcing he was not going to run again. I don't think it was because of my broadcast. I think that was just one small straw on the camel's back. He had a lot of other reasons.
Is there a place in television for what you might call an op-ed page for television itself?
I think so, very definitely. I'm sorry that the networks, the traditional networks, don't do it anymore. With Chancellor's passing, that was the last of the commentators. We had a definition at CBS, or at least I had, and I think it was rather universally adopted at the network, that our people were, Severide's role was as an analyst, not as a commentator. There were commentators, editorialists, and analysts. Mm-hmm. Analysts tried to give both sides, but looking behind the headlines, behind the daily stories, as to why things happened, how things happened, why they happened. The commentator was one who actually did comment, gave opinion on how it happened. Our people tried to be analysts and not commentators, and there is a definite difference there. I think there's a place, definitely a place, labeled as such by people who are qualified to do so. A Lippman would have been perfect today. A Kroc would have been less perfect, but good. Scotty Reston would have been wonderful on television, as Severide was, as Chancellor was. Unfortunately, we don't have that anymore. It would be good.
There's been a conglomeration of power and control and just in fewer and fewer hands. Is that a problem as far as you're concerned?
Well, I think, yes, I think that the broader the ownership of television stations, which is even a more serious problem, and networks, the more diverse the ownership will be, and the more diverse the views of owners may be toward how their news is gathered and distributed, and that's quite important. The more monopolistic that is, the fewer views the public is likely to be exposed to, the less broad the coverage is likely to be. There has been through running always, there's been a current kind of in the background of television network coverage of why do we have to all cover the same story at the same time. There was one of the heads of NBC who otherwise I thought was quite a well considered president of the organization, who didn't understand at all. Every time he'd see a picture of a news conference with all those cameras and all those microphones, he said, why is that necessary? We're all spending that money, we're crowding the thing, why not one microphone, one camera?
Pool it all, a pool for the different organizations.
Yeah, yeah. And it should be pooled, of course. And my argument with that was, how do we know? How do we know that that one camera wouldn't be turned off at one point or another by the whim or will of the cameraman or the reporter or whatever? We need to be there so we all can make our own cuts, our own version of what was said and what was broadcast. News has always been something of a tail on the dog, although in the early days, all the principal owners, Paley, and Sarnoff and Gordonson, as you say, they learned their responsibilities at the feet of Congress as Congress developed the Federal Communications Act. And they were told what their responsibilities were. They went into it purely as entrepreneurs, but they were taught that they had a responsibility, and they took it to heart, took it very much to heart. The news departments were their showcases of integrity, showcases of principle, showcases of responsibility. And they turned it over to news people to run. There was never any interference. In my days at CBS, there was only, in the whole time that I was managing editor of the news, there was only one case when there was ever any interference with what we put on the air. Was there any instruction of what we should put on the air or what we should keep off the air? And that was a kind of a freak case that really didn't count, I don't think.
What was that case?
That was a case when we decided to sum up the Watergate scandal. It had almost disappeared from the newspapers. There hadn't been any new revelations for some weeks. What was reported was was further and further back in the newspapers. It had disappeared from many newspapers. We were coming up on an election, and it looked like the people were forgetting the scandal of Watergate almost as we approached that election. And I felt it necessary that we review what we had known about the Watergate scandal and point out that it still hung out there somewhere, undecided.
There's now the 72 election.
Yes.
Right.
And so we did a very long piece, the longest piece we'd ever done, as the first of a two-part piece, summing up all of the evidence of Watergate. And that was on a Friday. We said we'd be back on Monday with the second half of that piece. Well, between Friday and Monday, the White House was exceedingly busy getting on to Paley and to Stanton.
The Nixon White House.
Oh, yes, the Nixon
Right.
White House, indeed. And they made all sorts of threats. And Paley, of course, relayed them to Dick Salant, president of CBS News. And Salant found a wonderful way to compromise, in a sense. He said, well, he agreed with Paley that too much time had been given to it on Friday, that the piece, while good, did not warrant spending more time than we'd ever spent on a single story before on the half-hour news, and that he was going to see that the second piece was trimmed down proportionally to make it fairer and so forth. And Paley accepted that. And as a matter of fact, I agreed that the second piece was long in the first place, even before Salant mentioned it. But it wasn't difficult to cut at all. We didn't lose a darn thing out of it. But it kept me from saying, since then, as I would have said to you a moment ago, I was never told to take anything in or out of a piece.
In today's climate in the fall of 2001, what advice would you have for Michael Powell, the son of Secretary of State Colin Powell, who's the chairman of the Federal Communications Commission? What would you like him to do? Michael Powell.
I would like him to stop the monopolization of television ownership in the country, to reverse course. He is in favor, apparently, of letting owners buy more than one station in a community.
Yes.
Buy newspapers as well as television stations in a community. The monopolization of community television and news dissemination, that's dangerous to our democracy.
If I gave you a magic wand that gave you mystical and fantastical powers to do anything you wanted, how would you change the structure and face of American television with particular regard to television journalism? What would you do?
I'd turn it over to the news people. I would try to assure that the news people did indeed have a budget necessary to do what they believed was necessary. I think that the news management of each of the traditional networks is quite capable of doing an excellent job, but it can't do it if it's not given the funds with which to do it. And that is why we have not had an adequate coverage of world news, foreign news on our networks for the last several years. With the growth of the cable all news channels, the viewership on the traditional networks has been reduced considerably. In my day, we had 98% of the viewers were watching the three networks. Today, less than 50% of the viewers are watching the traditional networks. With that deep cut in their viewing audience, the ownership has demanded an attempt to get back some of that, of course, as much as possible. The fight for viewers has increased, but at the same time, the budget has been cut. And so where did they cut the budget? In foreign news coverage. We know as little as we do about the Arab world and the world of Islam today because we haven't covered any of it for years.
In recent years, you've been a passionate sailor on your glorious boat, and I wish you a long and beautiful voyage, and thank you ever so much for coming.
Thank you, Steve.